Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Suzy Loftus, and I'm running to be San Francisco's next district attorney because I believe we can make San Francisco the most safe and most just city in America. San Francisco is where I'm from. It's where I rode Muni to my public school. It's where I'm raising my 3 daughters. And I think it's a place that can be a beacon of what progressive values in action look like. I've devoted my career to building safety. I built safety as a prosecutor. I built safety as a public health official who worked out in Bayview to build a center for kids who've been exposed to violence. And I built safety as someone who has reformed the San Francisco Police Department. Our current system isn't working well enough for everyone. We all know that. It's not working for the folks who are incarcerated. It's not working for the folks who are in our communities. San Francisco is a city where we can demonstrate that we can build safety in all communities, not by zip code, and we can build justice for all, not just for some. Thank you.
Next, Chesa.
Thank you. I'm Chesa Boudin. Let me tell you why I'm different than all the other candidates. When I was in diapers, my parents drove the getaway car in an armed robbery that left 3 men dead. My mother ended up serving 22 years in prison. My father is still incarcerated today and they never get out. Years of going through steel gates just to see my parents taught me how profoundly broken our criminal justice system is. I advocated for reform starting in grade school, through my time in law school, and then after clerking for 2 federal judges here in California, I decided to join the San Francisco Public Defender's Office. That is a big difference. I'm the only candidate on stage who decided not to become a prosecutor. I'm the only one who's never used money bail. I've never cooperated with ICE, and I work every day in the Hall of Justice, not to send more people to prison, but to find better outcomes for those accused of committing crimes. If we want to change the system, it starts with the people we elect to the office of district attorney. Please join me in fixing this broken system. Thank you.
Next, Nancy.
Is it okay if I stand up?
Sure.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Tung, and I'm running to be your next San Francisco District Attorney. I'm a daughter of immigrants, a wife, a mother, and a career prosecutor. 18 years as a prosecutor, 16 of those years right here in San Francisco. I've handled thousands of cases over the course of my career, from violent felonies to civil frauds to complex litigation against companies like Uber. I've protected domestic violence victims and held police officers accountable by trying them in court. My vision for the District Attorney's Office is something I like to call community-centered justice. It means that every neighborhood, every community in San Francisco knows that the District Attorney's Office is here for you every single day. We will focus on the crimes that affect your communities the most and address them head on, because we know what's not working is what's happening on the streets. I never thought that I would run for political office. In fact, I was content to be a line prosecutor in San Francisco for the rest of my career.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry.
But I'm here now. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Leif.
Well, after that, there's no way I can stay seated. My name is Leif Dautch, and I currently serve as a Deputy Attorney General for the state of California. I'm running for district attorneys to restore some accountability to our criminal justice system, whether that's holding our city leaders accountable for the humanitarian and public health crisis that we all walked through today on the way to this debate, to hold the organized rings that are breaking into our cars by the dozens accountable, to hold the powerful and law enforcement accountable if they engage in misconduct. I've been passionate about these issues my entire life, and it started with my mom. She was a nurse at the local juvenile hall down along the central coast of California where I grew up, and she would tell us about the kids that she was working with. And at one point she said, we've got to become foster parents. We took in a dozen foster kids over the course of a decade, ended up adopting 2. So I've seen the impact that amazing people, just like my mom, working inside the criminal justice system can have to make sure we can be a compassionate and progressive city and a safe and a clean city as well. That's why I'm running for DA and why I love your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please, no clapping. Thank you. So we will now go to the moderated questions section. We will begin with each seat number. So Suzy will be the first to answer question number 1, and then question number 2. Chesa will start and we'll go that way. The first, and then Tyra again will have the time cards. You will have 90 seconds to each question. Question number 1 is on mass incarceration. The United States Supreme Court has held that overcrowding in California's prisons was a violation of the constitutional right against cruel and unusual punishment. This was in part due to deficiencies in prison medical and mental health care. However, even if we get and stay below the population that the court found constitutional, our prison facilities will still be at 132% of their designated capacity, which means 32% over what they're built for. What is your vision for a sustainable prison population in California, and what specific set of reforms can and will you pursue as San Francisco District Attorney to make that a reality?
Thank you. I'm going to stand up just because these chairs, if you could sit in them, they're kind of shrink down. So I think you're going to have a lot of standing candidates tonight. In the last 30 years, California built 21 prisons and 1 university, right? So what we did was invest in a strategy that good folks thought was designed to make them safe. And we know that it's broken and it didn't work and it destroyed families and exacerbated racial disparities, and it was a failure. And so the question is, how do we do something different? And I think in San Francisco, the District Attorney's Office put out a report last year that San Francisco incarcerates at 1/3 of the rate of the rest of the country and 1/2 of the rate of California. So San Francisco is leading the way on building out alternatives to incarceration. What we have to continue to do is build out shared safety. We currently have about 1,274 people in our county jail and 1,600 people out of custody in alternatives to incarceration. We need to build that out. We need to expand our neighborhood courts so that we're showing is we can build accountability for problems in our neighborhood that don't rely on mass incarceration and a system that is the most expensive intervention we have with the highest failure rate. 70% of the time people who go into this system come out and they commit another crime. So we have to have a moment of reckoning where we build out things like neighborhood courts. We reduce our footprint of mass incarceration by building out restorative justice, which at its heart is about accountability. Centers the victim and says something was wrong here, how can we make it right? And none of that requires incarcerating.
Thank you. Chesa, would you like me to repeat the question or you got it?
I'm going to stand up like I've been standing up to fight against mass incarceration my entire career.
Don't do that to him.
Appreciate it. So, as a public defender, one of the things that I've done every day is to fight to reduce mass incarceration. I haven't just done it one case at a time, but I've done it through systematic impact litigation, trying to change a system that we all now recognize is unjust. For years, I've fought the fight against money bail. For years before that, I was working to end immigration detention and stop cooperation between San Francisco Sheriff and ICE. And look, if we want to end mass incarceration, I don't believe we can trust or rely on people who have been part of the problem to do it. We have a long legacy of people who have chosen to become prosecutors, sending more mostly black and brown young men to prison. That's what district attorneys have done across this country for centuries. We need to change it, and the change should come from people who've been fighting the fight for years. I want to give you a couple of very concrete examples of what I'm going to do to bring about those changes on day one. First of all, end 3-strike sentencing, because there's no room for baseball in the courtroom. Second of all, close juvenile hall and county jail number 4, because we are safer when we invest in education rather than incarceration. Third, we're going to stop charging money bail because it's discriminatory, it makes us less safe, and it contributes to mass incarceration. If we think outside the box, then we can close the box and actually make our community safer while ending mass incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
So I've been a prosecutor for the last 18 years, and I think that when hey, I got a thumbs down back there. I've been serving the people of this city, I've been serving the people of this state. And while you may disagree with what a prosecutor's role may be, there is something that you should be proud of. Because in San Francisco, out of 58 counties, we send the second least amount of people per capita to state prison. And that's a fact. We have been so progressive in San Francisco that if you would replicate our incarceration rates across the country, we would not have mass incarceration anymore. So I think there's a lot to be proud of in San Francisco, that the way that we treat people who have been accused of crime is a rather humane way that we treat them. You know, and growing up as a prosecutor in San Francisco, I've seen the way that we approach crime, I've seen the way that we approach diversion, and I think it's a really, really valuable tool that we continue to proselytize about the way that we do things in San Francisco, that we continue to show how we have programs in county jail to help rehabilitate and educate people, and that we continue on in the way that we as San Franciscans know how to be just and fair to everybody involved in the system.
Thank you. Leif.
Nancy, look at what you started. Stand up every time. So I think many of us on this stage agree that our criminal justice system is broken. And there's a thoughtful way to reform the system, and frankly, there's a reckless way to reform the system. The reckless way is just to let tens of thousands of people out of prison, having done nothing to address underlying root causes, and then to throw up our hands if there's a spike in crime. Historically, we've done that as the pendulum has shifted back and forth. I want to do it the thoughtful way, and the answer to me that I have seen is in the juvenile justice system. I mentioned that my mom was a nurse at the local juvenile hall where I grew up. That is what inspired me to serve as the president of the Juvenile Probation Commission here in San Francisco. And by doing reform the thoughtful way, drilling down to root causes, understanding what is driving this young person's issue. Is it a mental health issue? Is it substance abuse? Is it a family issue, an economic opportunity issue? Let's solve that underlying root cause to turn that young person's life around and making sure that that one-time mistake doesn't turn into a lifetime of crime. That's a model we know works for young people. We were able to go from juvenile hall full with 150 kids a decade ago to now it's at 32. That's why we can shut it down, which I strongly support, and we can transform that juvenile hall into a mental health justice center to give folks on the streets the mental health services that they need. That's the model we know works, restorative justice, rehabilitative focus. Let's take that, expand it to 18 to 24-year-olds, what they call transitional age youth, expand that to the entire adult system, and reform the system, but do it the thoughtful and the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 2, Chesa will start answering this question. And the question is on police misconduct. If elected, how would you direct the office of the district attorney to handle officer-involved shootings and police brutality? Do you believe there's enough transparency and accountability in the current process? And if not, what specifically would you do to change it?
A few years ago, I was walking down the street very near here, and I came across a group of all-white police officers arresting a homeless African-American man. I took out my phone, like many other people on the street that day, and I started recording. That turned into a video that more than 7 million people have watched. It's a Know Your Rights video that illustrates the ways in which police on the streets of San Francisco violate people's rights. And we need to work with the police, but we need to work with the police who respect the law. And when they don't, we need an independent district attorney who's willing to enforce the law equally. Now, that's my track record. As a public defender, I've cross-examined police officers in court almost on a daily basis. I've also exposed ongoing abuse at the hands of sheriff's deputies in County Jail number 5. I've also worked to hold ICE officers accountable. I've sued ICE, starting when I was in law school, for illegal arrests. That's the kind of independence and the kind of track record that our next district attorney needs. When I'm elected, here's what I'm going to do. First of all, personally make charging decisions in every officer-involved shooting case, because we need a district attorney with the independence and the courage to make a decision themselves. Second, throw out evidence and cases that are marred by racial bias, excessive force, or other police misconduct. And third, have a transparent process where the public knows exactly when and what to expect from us. The public deserves that much. Public safety requires that much. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy.
Thank you. So, I said before, I'll say it again, I'm a prosecutor. And I'm the only person on this stage that in a criminal context has investigated and prosecuted police officers for misconduct. I want to tell you about a couple of cases. The first one was an off-duty officer who committed domestic violence against his girlfriend. And I prosecuted that cop, and I won that case at trial. The second one is a sheriff's deputy who was accused of mistreating a patient, a homeless patient, at San Francisco General Hospital. And I prosecuted that case and I won that case. So when you talk about police accountability, when you talk about someone who has also worked with the police, you can look at me because I have a track record that shows you that I have worked with police, but then I can also turn around and make sure that they are accountable for what they do. I think that one of the things that we can do better at in terms of the district attorney's office is making sure that we have a transparent process so that the public understands what we're doing and that police officers understand what we're doing. Because we walk a fine line, but when that line is crossed, we need to make sure that the district attorney's office is holding those people accountable. And that's what I will do every single day that I am the district attorney in San Francisco.
Thank you. Leif?
So even one officer-involved shooting is too many. And if police officers engage in misconduct, they have to be held accountable. One of the first groups that I met with after I filed to run for DA was a group of community activists who, many of them had lost family members to police violence. And they identified three main concerns with the current, with the status quo and the way these cases were being handled. One, these cases were taking years to resolve. Two, there was no transparency or real kind of full explanation about the charging decision. And three, it was like a all or nothing, murder or nothing charging decision. So I have based my platform specifically on those concerns that I heard from the community and from families most affected by this. I vowed to make a charging decision in every officer-involved shooting within 6 months. I have vowed to hold a town hall and face the music and answer every single question about why I have charged or have not charged an officer. And third, I'm going to consider every possible charge. It isn't just a murder or nothing. There may be negligent discharge of a firearm, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, those charges that are winnable that can give some semblance of justice to those families. It's also important to recognize that in the 99+% of cases that are not officer-involved shootings, we do need a district attorney who is able to be independent and work with law enforcement. I am that sort of prosecutor right now, and I will be that sort of district attorney, holding bad apples accountable, but being able to work with the men and women of the San Francisco Police Department to solve those murder cases, those sexual assault cases, those burglaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzy?
I spent years of my career holding the police accountable on the San Francisco Police Commission, and that's why I've earned the sole endorsement of Supervisor Shaman Walton, of activist and reformer Latifah Simon. What I did as president of the San Francisco Police Commission is three things. One, I terminated more officers for serious misconduct than had ever been terminated in the history of the San Francisco Police Commission. Two, I made sure every San Francisco police officer has a body-worn camera, right? This is a search for the truth. We want to know what's happening. Third thing is, I reformed the use of force policy for the first time in 20 years, and I didn't do it alone. I did it with the help of the ACLU. I did it with the help of the San Francisco Bar Association. I did it with a lot of help of people who are in this room, community activists. Vinny Ging in the back, who's now on my campaign. Holding police accountable takes all of us, and you don't have to guess what my record would be on that, because the San Francisco Examiner called me the face of police reform. But it's still not enough. There's three things you need from your next district attorney. One is, the police department should not be investigating themselves. We need to bring in outside investigators. The California Department of Justice can do it. That's what we need. Second, the Independent Investigations Bureau shouldn't just handle cases of official misconduct. If a police officer picks up a DUI or is in a domestic violence incident, it's still a specialized prosecution to hold law enforcement accountable. That needs to be in that specialized unit. And third, we have to bring so much more transparency to this process. It is opaque at best and misleading at worst. And as your district attorney, the results of my investigations will be up on our website, and we will continue to have this conversation in the community, because if we don't trust the police, they cannot serve us. Thank you.
Thank you. Third question, Nancy will start, and it is on the point of addressing racism and racial bias and other disparities within the criminal justice system. African Americans are only 5% of San Francisco's population, but regularly constitute 40% of our incarcerated population. What will you do as a district attorney to address this disturbing disparity? More specifically, what measurable plans, policies, programs, or practices will you implement to combat both implicit and overt bias in decision-making within your office, and particularly when it comes to charging decisions, bail recommendations, divergent program placements, and plea bargains?
So I think that what George Gaston has started in terms of eliminating racial disparities in our district attorney's office, with particularly in terms of charging, I think that's an interesting thing that I'd like to see the results of. to kind of move forward on, to see if there is actually a difference when we think about charging decisions, and then also moving forward to how we do our plea bargaining within the system. I think that when you think about racial disparities and traditional groups that have been over-incarcerated, we have to be careful about thinking about where the people are coming from, whether or not that actually is representative of San Francisco, and not conflating the two between how much of the population in San Francisco and how much of our population in county jail is of a certain racial group, because it's different. Those are different types of statistics, and I think we need to look at them differently. But in terms of what we can do to lift up our racial minorities in San Francisco, I think we can do a lot by going into underserved communities, underserved populations of poverty, and really addressing what are the root causes of criminality by putting more money behind education, opportunity, and involvement with mentorship for those populations.
Thank you. Leif?
So there's a thing that happens in our criminal justice system when punishment gets more severe, it disproportionately impacts people of color. And when we ratchet down severity, it disproportionately helps people that look like me. So even with our juvenile justice system, where I think we've done great work, we've reduced the population from 150 kids at the hall down to about 32 right now. Well, over 90% of those 32 are kids of color. So we have to be laser focused on this issue and not just be passive and assume that benefits of reform will inure to the benefit of everyone. We have to be proactive about this to make sure it does happen. Nancy mentioned this race-blind charging decision that Gascon has piloted this project. It's something I absolutely want to continue. Redacting the name, the race, and the neighborhood of suspects and witnesses to make sure that that prosecutor is making a decision based on the facts, not based on any sort of identity of that person. I also think that we really need to be looking at implicit bias training. There's actually some interesting stuff out there with virtual reality of really allowing people to harness technology to walk in people's shoes and see the ugly face of racism in the criminal justice system. And finally, we need to make sure that we are hiring, retaining, and promoting a diverse set of attorneys. I'm looking at adopting the Rooney Rule, which is something that first started in the NFL with head coaching hiring. I will not close an applicant pool or promotion pool without making sure there's at least one person of color in there, to making sure that we are giving everyone a chance to succeed and excel. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzy?
So I've announced that I'll start the first ever civil rights unit in the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. I recently stood with a group of prosecutors, and this is what I said to them. I said, I know that you didn't take this job to exacerbate racial disparities, but that's what's happening. And it's happening on your watch. And you're charged with being the people's lawyer, so it has to be up to you to say, not on my watch, I'm not doing this. And what that looks like is, and I've announced, it will be an unflinching audit of the practices of the District Attorney's Office. Because what we know is, racial disparities exist here at arrest. They rise on who actually gets booked into custody. It grows as who gets charged. It grows as who gets convicted. And then it grows in terms of what the sentence is. So there are many touch points in this process that the prosecutor's office has to look at itself and say, how can we eliminate bias as it grows? I built the first ever training on procedural justice and implicit bias with Jennifer Eberhardt, the expert from Stanford for law enforcement, which became a model up and down the state. We've got to train prosecutors on the science of bias so that we can guard against it, and we have to look at our practices and tell everyone, this is our charge to fix. But what I have to say is this, people of color are also 15 times more likely to be victims of crime. The group that faces the largest homicide rate is African American women. Native women, the third cause of death is murder. So part of what we have to talk about is how we're failing communities of color across the board and how we can build shared safety.
Thank you. Chesa?
Let's recognize for a moment that the racism described in your question is based on hundreds of years of institutionalized oppression of people of color who have been systematically excluded, not just through the criminal justice system, but through housing policy, education policy, through zoning, through slavery and the legacy of slavery. It is going to be a hard job to fix it, and it is not enough to have a district attorney. who simply isn't racist. As Angela Davis, one of the people I'm really proud to list as one of my endorsements and supporters and friends, says, we need not just no racism, but anti-racism. So I want to talk for a moment about what it means to be anti-racist in this moment of criminal justice reform. First of all, recognizing that there is racism at every single step of the criminal justice process, right? That there's a school to prison pipeline, that it's about policing, it's about arresting, it's about charging, it's about rebooking, it's about representation from the public defenders and court-appointed lawyers, it's about every single step of the process. If we want to change that, we need to do a lot of hard work. And it starts with hiring diverse staff, it starts with implicit bias training. It starts with ending the horrific practices of overcharging and using money bail to coerce guilty pleas. It starts with making sure that we are committed not just to being race neutral, but to righting the historic wrongs that manifest so brutally and so ferociously every day in our Hall of Justice.
Thank you. The next question is on youth justice, and Leif gets to start that one. The San Francisco Board of Supervisors recently passed a resolution to close our juvenile detention facility by 2021. The supervisors behind the resolution included provisions to replace it with community-based programs and facilities that will provide mental health services, job training, and other support systems aimed at helping young people transform their lives. Do you support these efforts? And in that spirit, as the DA, what would your policies be regarding prosecuting young people as adults, prosecuting children as adults, and seeking life without parole sentences for young people under the age of 26?
Well, if you've been paying attention, my answer is not going to be any surprise. I was proud to stand by Chesa's side at the steps of City Hall when this proposal was first issued about shutting down Juvenile Hall. It's 80% empty. There's 32 kids there, 10 of whom are on misdemeanor charges, don't pose a significant public safety threat. 10 of them are there on probation violation charges. I think the era of locking up kids is over, and that is step one. Step two, though, is what are we going to do with this 150-bed facility that was just retrofitted 10 years ago that's state-of-the-art? And again, as those of you who walked, regardless whether you came from the north, the south, the east, or the west, we have a humanitarian and public health crisis playing out in our city right now with the mental health crisis on our street. If we can open a 150-bed mental health justice center at the former Juvenile Hall, we will radically improve those people's lives, the lives of all of us, and the face of our city. So that's going to be one of my top priorities as elected district attorney. I've said before, what we do in terms of restorative justice and rehabilitation works. That's what I want to expand to the entire adult system. And let's treat kids like kids. I will not be seeking life without possibility of parole sentences for people under 26, I think you said. The era of locking up kids in cages, locking up kids in adult prison is over, and I want to be no part of that.
Thank you. Suzy?
So I put out a plan to end the incarceration of children as we know it, because part of what we need to think about is this conversation is bigger than just about a building. It's about kids and families that we've been failing for some time. That's part of why I left my career as a prosecutor and went out to Bayview Hunters Point and partnered with a pediatrician you all might know named Nadine Burke-Harris. She should definitely get some of this. She's our first Californian Surgeon General, and she's a pediatrician who I met when I was a prosecutor. And my then boss, Kamala Harris, who's supporting me in this race, said, we're not going to arrest and prosecute our way out of what's happening in many of our communities. We need to fundamentally help kids sooner and earlier. And what I'm reminded of is, today obviously we lost Toni Morrison, Nobel laureate, poet, and someone who inspired many of us. And I'm reminded of what she said when she said, if you're in a position of power or trust, start with dreaming before you think. And I think we have forgotten what our dreams are for our children. And I say our children because regardless of zip code, we're talking about our kids. And as a mother of 3, we're failing kids in the juvenile justice system every day. And if we think we're succeeding, we're failing ourselves. So what we need to do is, 1, build a seamless web of services that are responsive and culturally competent for kids and families. 2, what we need to do is reimagine restorative justice and expand on some of those programs, because the juvenile justice system is actually the one that is meant to rehabilitate. So we have an opportunity to do that work in partnership with the community, and that's fundamentally how we will end the incarceration of children as we know it.
Thank you. Chesa?
You know, as Leif said, I've supported closing juvenile hall since day one of this process with the Board of Supervisors. I want to first give a shout out to the grassroots organizations, the mothers, the families, the community activists that have been doing this work since way before the Board of Supervisors introduced the resolution. They, like so often is the case, are leading us in the right direction, and here's why. Closing juvenile hall, treating kids like kids, not putting kids in cages is a critical first step to ending mass incarceration. Not only because it reduces the number of human beings that sleep in cages every day, but also because of the school-to-prison pipeline. Look, my brother is a 6th grade science teacher here in the Bay. He's been in the same public school classroom for about 15 years. And many of the kids who I met when I guest lectured at his class are now incarcerated themselves. Right? That's what the school-to-prison pipeline looks like, and it often makes a stop in juvenile hall. We need to transform the contacts that young people have with the criminal justice system into opportunities for rehabilitation and intervention. I'm so proud to have the support of our City College Teachers Union, who know as I do that we are all safer when we invest in education rather than incarceration, and who know that when we build jails, we fill them. I am committed to closing juvenile hall. I'm committed to never charging someone under the age of 26 or seeking a life sentence for someone under the age of 26. And also, let's go further. Let's close County Jail number 4, and let's do it in the first year I'm in office.
No clapping. Thank you, Chesa. Nancy, sorry I have to do this, but it's part of the rules.
Thank you for being fair. So I am going to be very different on this position than the rest of my fellow candidates here. I don't think that we can close juvenile hall without having, okay, I see you. I don't think we can close juvenile hall. It's like saying, hey, let's have some cotton candy for breakfast, because there are still going to be juveniles who are detained because a judge has determined that they are too violent or too dangerous to public safety to be released into the community. And what I want to say about that is that when you have a child who is at this inflection point in their life, where they have committed a very serious crime that requires them to be detained, we need to make sure that they're not taken out of their community. So right now there are 2 juveniles who we can't service in San Francisco, and they've been shipped off to Los Angeles. And so what's happening to them, right? How are their families able to support them? Who's paying for their families to fly down to Los Angeles? And so what I want you to think about, and why I believe that it's important to have even a reduced footprint for juveniles that need to be detained, is that if you take them away, if you say that we don't have a place, then they are going to go to another county, like Alameda County, like San Mateo County, like Solano, Sacramento, and taken out of their community when they need their community the most.
Thank you. This will be the last question of the moderated section, and we will start back up with Suzy. The question is, there are some domestic violence prevention services available to city residents, including a cooperative restraining order clinic. However, they are underfunded and not well publicized. As district attorney, what will you do to strengthen the preventative services available to victims and improve the way sexually violent crimes are handled within the city?
Thank you. I was a domestic violence prosecutor. I was an elder abuse prosecutor, and my mom was a victim of crime when I was a kid. So in the 40 years since she was victimized, we haven't done enough to bring survivors the healing that they need, and to recognize when we're trying to interrupt the cycle of violence, sometimes we focus on the defendant, but we forget about the victim and the survivor. And when I say forget, I mean fail them. So a domestic violence restraining order clinic and the ability to know that you are safe from someone who is trying to bring you harm is so essential to your very sense of agency, your very sense of safety. And one of the things that I'm committed to as district attorney is this concept of parallel justice, which is understood as, let's think about giving housing and treatment on the defendant side. Do we think about giving housing and treatment and advocates to go to the clinic? People who have been victims of domestic violence, that is some of the hardest types of cases to navigate in our system. It's someone who loves you, who hurts you, and you need support. You need a district attorney's office who is going to commit the resources, not only to our office, but to work with community partners, the clinics who actually serve you, and make sure that you have someone walking you through that process Because that also helps us make sure that when it comes time for you to testify and hold the person accountable who hurt you, you are able to do that. You're able to stand in that courtroom and face that person, and that's an important part of what we do. We're failing victims and survivors, and we need to build a better response, and I will do that as your district attorney.
Thank you. Chesa.
I understand that many of the people who we accuse of crimes are themselves victims and survivors of sexual assault. I understand that many of the people we send to jails and prisons will be sexually assaulted while they're there. And so I think we need to take a much broader, more comprehensive view about what sexual assault looks like in our community and how we in the district attorney's office can prevent it rather than contributing to it, minimizing it, or ignoring it. For far too long, the status quo has basically ignored sexual assault crimes, whether on the streets or behind bars. We've had a failure systematically in this city to test rape kits. We ask survivors of sexual assault to submit their bodies to invasive evidentiary gathering procedures, and then we let those pieces of evidence gather dust on shelves. That is a disgrace. Now here's the plan that I have for addressing this really, really central issue. I'm proud to say I announced it with one of my supporters, Supervisor Ronan, a few weeks ago. There's more details than I'll have time to get into right now, but here are the highlights. First of all, we will test every rape kit immediately. Second of all, we will give every single survivor of sexual assault a voice in the process. We will keep them informed of what the decisions are and why those decisions are being made. Third, we will expand the use of drug recognition experts so we are combating drug-facilitated sexual assault. And fourth, we will prioritize these cases over the misdemeanors that currently account for 2/3 of the jury trials in the Hall of Justice.
Thank you. Nancy.
So the Cooperative Restraining Order Clinic is a resource that is very near and dear to my heart. For 2 years, I was a domestic violence prosecutor, prosecuting felony crimes, mostly against women and women of color. And I also handled every single stalking case that came across the San Francisco Police Department's desk. In that period of time, I worked very closely with the attorneys at Croc because they were there for victims every single day, irrespective of whether or not a case got filed. And I saw that these women, because they're women who work in this tireless nonprofit, they actually did a lot of good. They gave victims a sense of safety and security with a restraining order that protected them from their abusers. And so I think that we should expand upon these programs. I think we need to find additional funding for them in order to transition them out to a broader audience for people who have actually been affected by sexual violence as well. But along that lines, in terms of preventative things that we can do, we can also prevent violence, and especially gun violence, with gun violence restraining orders, which is legal in the state of California. It's a law that's been implemented, that has been on the books for a couple of years, and has not been fully implemented in San Francisco. And what this is a red flag law that allows law enforcement to go in and take guns from people who threaten people and basically have mental illness or have some type of reason that they should not have guns. And so I think this is a way that we need to fully implement this in San Francisco to protect people here.
Thank you. Leif.
It is outrageous that in San Francisco, at the height of the Me Too movement, we are not doing right by survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. Out of 757 reported sexual assaults last year in the city, the district attorney's office only got 9 convictions after trial. And we wonder why reporting rates are so low. We've put out what the press called the most specific policy proposal in this area. We're going to establish a website where survivors of sexual assault can anonymously track the status and results of their rape kit, so they can hold us accountable. They can know what's happening with their case, hold prosecutors and police officers accountable. Idaho started it, that bastion of liberalism, Idaho. 18 other states and major cities like Houston have done it. It is time for San Francisco and the state of California to get on board. But that's not all we can do for victims of crime. There have been a series of violent attacks against elderly members of the Chinese American community in San Francisco. at least 8 high-profile ones this year alone. That's why just today we rolled out a proposal for having an elder justice coordinator in the DA's office who will oversee all physical and financial crimes against senior citizens and make sure that they are interfacing with the community and making sure those cases are being investigated and prosecuted appropriately. I think it's that sort of approach, making sure that victims of crime get the justice they deserve, that's earned us the endorsement of the San Francisco firefighters, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, and leaders from across the political spectrum, from Fiona Ma to the Latino Democratic Club, and Mark Sanchez and Gabriel Lopez on the school board. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed to the second section of the debate. Before we do that, I just want to remind everyone, if you have questions written in your flashcards, you can start passing it around. Austin is here, or if you need one, just let us know, but it would be good to start collecting those flashcards. So this section, just so that everybody knows what the rules are, each candidate will get to ask another candidate on the panel a question. One question. Not one question with 3 parts. Just one clear, specific, precise question. So just... There will be 2 rounds of this section of the debate, so we will start with Chesa. Chesa will ask any one of you a question, and then that person will respond, and then anybody on the panel will get a 30-second rebuttal opportunity. If you would like to rebut, just raise your hand so I know you'd like to do that, but you get 1 rebuttal per round. Let's see. So, is that clear? Any questions? Okay.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
For one of the candidates.
Not yet. So just for timing purposes, you get 30 seconds to ask a question. At 30 seconds, we will cut you off if your question is not clear. It's your loss. The person to whom the question is directed will get 90 seconds to answer that question. And if you'd like to make a rebuttal, you get 30 seconds for a rebuttal. So at this point, we will start. Chesa will ask the first question. Let us know who you would like to ask and shoot away. 30 seconds.
This question is for Leif. Almost immediately after the Deputy Sheriff's Association endorsed you, they began attacking me on their Facebook page, putting out a video that was made by the John Birch Society, an organization that believes the civil rights movement was a communist plot. You and I took a clean campaign pledge. Are you going to take down their endorsement and renounce their support for you in light of those slanderous attacks?
So I issued the Clean Campaign Pledge saying I would have no personal attacks on any other campaigns, that I also wouldn't take money from within the DA's office, and that I wouldn't accept any money from the bail industry. As soon as I saw that video, I put out a statement publicly renouncing it. And I spoke to folks at the Deputy Sheriff's Association, and I made clear that that's not the sort of campaign that I'm running, that I am proud to have their support, that they are a critical partner in addressing the criminal justice reform aspects that we talked about, in partnering with folks at the county jail to make sure these rehabilitative, restorative justice practices are adopted, but that is not what I want my campaign to be about, or anyone that I'm associated with. I'm proud to say, and I think you'd agree, that over the last 3 weeks since I had that conversation, there hasn't been anything of that sort up there. So, I think it's completely in conformity with the Clean Campaign Pledge that I took, and I've sent a message loud and clear that that is not what I will be doing, or anyone associated with me. No personal attacks. Let's keep this focused on the very real issues that the city is facing, our homelessness and mental health crisis, the explosion of property crime, and the relationship between communities of color and law enforcement. That's what I'm focusing my campaign on, and I'm proud to work with partners, but I'm also willing to hold them accountable if I feel like they step out of line.
Anybody would like to make a rebuttal? Great. Nancy? Next question is yours.
It's not often that you get lawyers not wanting to talk. So this is a question for Chesa, and my time's up then. It's been widely reported in the Chronicle, and it was my experience as a prosecutor in San Francisco, that the Public Defender's Office strategically delays felony cases from going to trial by flooding the courts with misdemeanor trials. Yet you've said at many public events and on your website that misdemeanor trials are a tremendous waste of resources. How will you, if you become district attorney, prevent public defenders, current legal colleagues, from engaging in this type of gamesmanship?
Well, let me just say, I think this is a critical issue in this race. We all are talking about the things we're going to focus resources on. Where are they going to come from? I may be the only progressive candidate for office in this country who is committed to not seeking an expanded budget in my first term in office. And here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it by making sure that the 2/3 of misdemeanors that go to trial in our courthouse, half of which are victimless crimes, don't go to trial. Well, how does that work? Why is it that the career prosecutors who've been running the Hall of Justice for the last 10 or 20 years have been unable to fix this broken marketplace for resolving cases, right? More than 90% of criminal cases resolved without a trial. So why is it that all these misdemeanors are clogging up the courts? I'll tell you why. Because the people making the offers to resolve the cases don't understand the incentives of the people accused of the crimes. I do. I've represented them. I've worked with the people advising them. And when I'm district attorney, I can guarantee you that we're going to reduce the number of jury trials and misdemeanor jury trials by at least 1/3 within my first 6 months. And we're going to do it by making sure that the drunk driving cases that currently represent more than half of the misdemeanor DUIs, first offense, no victim, do not go to trial. Those are the cases clogging up our courts. Those are the cases that can be resolved through treatment, through probation, through deferred entry of judgment, through early admission of responsibility, and through treatment, rather than wasting your time and our tax dollars and clogging up a courtroom that should be used to try a murder or a rape.
Thank you.
So I have a rebuttal on that. I think that...
That's your rebuttal?
Yeah, this is my rebuttal.
Okay.
I think that driving under the influence cases are some of the most important misdemeanors that we try in the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, because that is the potential, that is the intervention point for people who have decided that they're going to put your lives on the line as pedestrians, as bicyclists, by driving under the influence. And this is not a new thing. This is not a new thing. This is very real about public safety and making sure we hold people accountable, part of which is making sure that they go through treatment with these convictions. It is critically important to making sure that our streets are safe.
Thank you. Leif, next questions for you. Who would you like to ask and what's your question?
Suzy, given that you refuse to sign a pledge vowing not to accept money from people working in the DA's office, how can you assure the hardworking attorneys in that office that there will not be favoritism toward the select few who have given thousands of dollars to your campaign?
Oh, thank you, Leif. I'm not, what I did is I made my own pledge, because I looked at the kind of campaign I want to run, and I decided what I would commit to. And I committed to not soliciting contributions from any city employees at all, of which DAs are included, PDs are included. But you know what happens is, I've got a long track record of doing justice and working hard in San Francisco, so people have volunteered to support me, and I think that means a lot. I think prosecutors who are doing the work every day in this office have an important voice, and I see Rebecca Young here from the Public Defender's Office, and I remember when we tragically lost Jeff Adachi and Manohar Raju was placed in, that office made a large plea that the people who work in that office should decide who their boss is. The people who work in that office have a voice. And so no one has actually challenged the person who was appointed. There are people in the DA's office who work hard every day, and they want to be a part of the reform efforts. They want to be a part of a vision that looks at a different way to build safety. And if I have earned any of their support, I'm honored. And my track record is I will go into courtrooms every day and I will evaluate the work that people are doing. I will give them the support they need to do an excellent job. And that's how I'll make decisions about running that office, not based on anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebuttal?
Just to be clear, the pledge that Chesa and I took was that we would not solicit or accept any donations from within the DA's office. The pledge that Suzy took, not to solicit city employees, is the bare minimum requirements of the law, which I don't think is much of a pledge at all.
Thank you. Suzy, you get to ask your question. Who would you like to ask and what's your question?
Well, now I changed it. All right, thanks, Gail. Okay, so this is for Nancy. So Nancy, my question to you is, between the two of us, we have over 30 years experience experience as lawyers between the two of us, so I think there is a misconception in many ways historically in law enforcement that prosecutors can and do get justice only in the courtroom. So the question that I have for you is, as somebody who's been a prosecutor, what is the role of prevention, and how can we as prosecutors make sure that we're doing everything we can on the front end to prevent crime and not just on the back end when a crime occurs?
Well, thanks for that question, Suzy. Because our combined experience tells us that there's a lot we can do within the community in order to make communities safer and stop crime from happening. I think it starts with making sure that we invest in violence intervention programs. Like when I'm a mom who demands action, there's a group called Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I'm proud to be a member of the San Francisco group. We went to the Capitol this year and lobbied for an increase in violence intervention program funds from Republicans, from Democrats, from the governor, and we received an increase from $9 million to $27 million for programs like the ones at Huckleberry House right here in San Francisco. And I think that's one of the ways that we can participate in prevention rather than just say, okay, well, what do we do when the person has eventually wound up in the criminal justice system? The other thing that I really believe in is the value of mentorship. I've been a big brother, big sister mostly, for 12 years, mentoring a young girl that I met at the Columbia Park Boys and Girls Club in 2007. And she is one of the most engaged, wonderful young women that I know. We have worked together to keep her out of gangs and in school and on a track to making a better life for herself than her parents had here. And I'm very proud to say that she is an Army reservist and has been so for the last 2 years.
Thank you. Is that rebuttal? Go for it.
So I want to add 2 points that I think are really important when it comes to preventing crime. The first one is, let's recognize that 75% of the people booked into San Francisco County Jail are drug addicted, mentally ill, or both. If we continue to dump this public health crisis on the county jail, on the criminal justice system, we are never going to reduce the crime rate. The other thing I want to recognize is that many of the children who grew up visiting their parents in prison with me ended up incarcerated themselves. When we send less parents to prison, when we create diversion programs for parents who get arrested, we do more to reduce mass incarceration than...
Thank you.
Thank you. Then I'll tell you.
No worries. So we are now in round 2 of the candidate questions. I believe Nancy will start this round. Who will you like to ask, and what's your question?
So I have a question for Suzy. Suzy, you have worked for strong female leaders over the course of your legal career, but as we both know, law enforcement tends to be more male-dominated. What has been your experience as a woman in law enforcement?
There's not enough of us. So who here, any women in the house, this is a recruiting effort. When I was a domestic violence prosecutor, so throughout my time being a prosecutor, I had 3 children, and I found that the greatest exposure was how much experience matters. So I could connect with a victim of domestic violence with a shared experience of being a mom, and we do not still have enough women across the board in law enforcement who are doing justice. I was attracted to being a prosecutor because Kamala Harris gave a speech at a domestic violence event and said, the prosecutor is the one person in the courtroom whose job it is to do justice. The only one. That's your job. You've got one job, and it's to do justice. So we need more women, we need more people of color, but we also need to recognize that there is bias that does exist. When I was a police commissioner, sometimes I would be at events, and if my husband was there, someone would say, this is Commissioner Loftus, and someone would go to shake his hand. When I was a mom and a prosecutor, people in the office, senior managers, told me that I was a disappointment because I was going ahead to be a mom instead of being a real prosecutor. So we need women and people of color in all lines of management. We need people in charge. We need to completely re-envision what it means to have women at the table keeping this community safe.
Thank you. Any rebuttal? Okay. Next question, please.
Suzy, another question for you. A little bit less of a softball. You have been sued by Heather Marlowe because her rape kit went untested for years, a case that is now before the United States Supreme Court. Given this, how can we trust that you will deliver justice for survivors of sexual assault?
What happened to Heather Marlowe was a tragedy, and as soon as I learned of it as president of the police commission, I got to action, because no one on this stage has done more than me to address how this system has failed victims of sexual violence. So there's a few things that we did. There's backlogs all over the country, and you get a report that the backlog is ended, and then 3 years later there's another backlog. So I asked the question, why are we creating a backlog? And what I found in San Francisco was discretion was given to sergeants in the SBU unit to decide which kits got tested. So it would look like this. Do I believe you? If I believe you, I'm going to send this kit to the crime lab. If I don't believe you, I'm going to send this kit to the property room. The victim was never told. There was no investigation. This is the result of decades of victim shaming and blaming. And what we did in San Francisco was we took away that discretion. So every single kit, there were 437 at the time, were taken out of the property room and sent to the crime lab. But we didn't stop there. We required that all these kits get tested within 120 days. That became the standard for California. Assemblymember David Chu made it state law that those kits had to be tested within a certain period of time, and we didn't stop there, because another thing that we learned is that victims were not being told or updated on the progress. So we required that the police department actually engages with victims and lets them know, and then they have to report that back to the San Francisco Police Commission. What we have to do as a district attorney is hold people accountable for committing sexual violence, and I'm committed to doing
I have to interrupt you here. Thank you. But the next question is yours.
Oh, great.
So you get to pick a person and ask.
Oh, right. All right. It's actually not Leif, which is... Okay, Chesa. So gun violence and homicide has disproportionately impacted communities of color for decades. You've spoken about what it means and what you've done as a public defender, but I would like to hear what you specifically have done to protect victims of homicide and gun violence in San Francisco, in and outside of the courtroom.
I'm so glad you asked that question, Suzy, because I had a case recently, just maybe a year ago, where my client was targeted in an attempted murder. It was on video, it was in the Bayview and Housing Project. Through investigation, we uncovered this video, recorded on security footage, and it turned out that there was a search warrant issued by a San Francisco police sergeant identifying by name the person who had committed this attempted murder against my client. And subsequently, that sergeant learned that this person was actually a police informant and decided not to arrest him, to allow him to continue targeting my client. And then when my client took steps to defend himself, he was arrested and charged in a very serious case himself. Now, that case against my client ended up getting dismissed because the San Francisco District Attorney's Office and the San Francisco Police Department refused to disclose the fact that they had a hired hitman on their payroll. Now, there's a video of this. Anybody who wants to see it, I'm happy to show it to you. The case was dismissed after the Court of Appeal ordered the District Attorney's Office to give us that discovery, and the District Attorney's Office refused. They're trying to cover up their very deeds, and the reality is, it's not a coincidence that in that shooting, nobody in the entire Bayview neighborhood called the police to report that shooting. 12 shots fired, 2 groups of armed men, nobody called the police, broad daylight. Until we restore the trust between our communities that are impacted by violence and the law enforcement officials that are sworn to serve and protect them, we will never be safe.
I'll take the role on that.
You'll take that, Ronald?
Yeah, so there's an interesting thing listening to that story. It's entirely based in the perspective of a defense attorney representing their client. And what I'm hearing every day from communities of color across San Francisco is who has been with us, partnering with us in communities impacted by violence. And I'm the only person on this stage who's been doing that. That's why I have the support of Shaman Walton. That's why I have the support of Latifah Simon. That's why I have the support of so many leaders in this city who have been committed to San Francisco, working with survivors and building safety, not just now, but for the past decade.
Thank you. Anybody else want to make a rebuttal? Okay. Next question, Chesa.
Play ping pong. Suzy.
Very popular tonight. Thank you, Cal.
Suzy, you said that you support sanctuary city policy, yet when you worked for Kamala Harris, when she was district attorney, she opposed the sanctuary city policy, and she even handed kids over to ICE before they'd been prosecuted. You never spoke out against that. Are you willing to do so today?
I mean, sanctuary city is essential. It's critical to who we are as a city. I have often talked about sanctuary city makes us more safe. right? That there's no place for local law enforcement to care about what your status is. And in the climate that we're in with Donald Trump, we all need to speak with one voice, and the next district attorney needs to be someone who doubles down on the idea that we're a sanctuary city because it actually makes us more safe. Right now, what we're seeing is domestic violence victims aren't calling the police because their abuser is saying Trump is going to deport you. Right? So this is not an academic exercise. This does not need to be, what happened 10 years ago. Right now, we're in a crisis. My kid's soccer coach who has a green card didn't want to go to City Hall in case ICE was there. And she has a green card. So we're living in a culture of fear, and what we need to do is elect leaders who stand by Sanctuary City, who can go neighborhood by neighborhood and work with our communities to keep each other safe. Obviously, right now, where we are in 2019, I am committed to the San Francisco District Attorney's Office making immigration safe pleas, working with our advocates to build safety, and making sure that we are not cooperating with ICE because we don't care about what your status is. What we care about is making you safe. And the only way we can make you safe is if you can call the police when you need help. That is what San Francisco is about, and that's the sanctuary city that we will be when I'm your district attorney.
Sorry, it was a yes or no question. We get a yes or no answer.
So you can take this as your rebuttal if you'd like.
I will.
Okay, go ahead.
So that was a yes or no question, and in classic politics, you don't answer the question, right? But the reality is there's one of us on this stage who has been committed to immigrants' rights since way before it was a popular thing to do. I sued ICE in law school. I initiated the San Francisco Public Defender's Immigration Unit. I'm the only one on stage who's committed to create an immigrant defense unit within the district attorney's office once I'm elected. And we're not just gonna process U visas and T visas for immigrant victims of crime. We'll do that. We're not just going to make sure there are immigrant safe pleas. We'll do that. We're going to prosecute ICE agents.
Thank you. Rebuttals? Okay, so Nancy and then you.
Jason, if you were running for public defender, I would vote for you.
Leif, your rebuttal?
So I've been a prosecutor at the Attorney General's office for the last 7 years. I've prosecuted over 400 criminal cases, from trials to arguing the California Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit. I have seen the public safety benefits of our sanctuary city policy, and I'm proud to live in a sanctuary city. There's one case that comes to mind in particular, a sexual assault victim in the Mission who would refuse to pick up the phone and have that conversation. Her sister was the one who was our point of contact because she was so terrified as an undocumented survivor of sexual assault to put herself on our radar. That's someone who we got a conviction for, a 116-year to life sentence for a serial rapist, and it only happened because of our sanctuary city policy.
Thank you. Next question. Nancy, excuse me.
Oh, I thought I asked 2 questions.
Did you? I don't think. Oh, you did? Oh, wow. We went through this way faster than I thought.
Do I get to ask another?
No. Great. Well, we are done with that round. So thank you, all of you, for engaging in that process. Next is the questions from the audience. I am getting some cards, so I will start with this question, which is on the issue of immigration. And who was the last person to go? Nancy, right? So Leif will start. I will answer this. What steps will you take to further protect undocumented immigrants from ICE and any collateral immigration cases that arise from an individual's involvement with the criminal justice system?
So as I just mentioned, I'm proud to live in a sanctuary city. I've seen the public safety benefits as a prosecutor, and I will continue to be a vocal and public leader on this, as I think is so necessary in the era we're in right now, with all the vitriol and bigotry and xenophobia coming out of Washington. I will make sure that every single prosecutor in my office is trained on immigration law, on avoiding the collateral consequences when charging and resolving cases. But I think we need to think even bigger. And my first job in San Francisco out of law school was clerking for a judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. One of the cases that I worked on involved a young woman seeking asylum from El Salvador. Her father had been murdered by MS-13, and this young woman had the courage to go into court and testify against the murderous gang that had killed her father. She fled, probably sure death and persecution in El Salvador to get to the United States, and this country denied her asylum relief because there was a narrow reading of what made you eligible for immigration benefits there. I knew that was wrong, I convinced the judge I was working for to take that case up to the entire Ninth Circuit. We rewrote immigration law. We rewrote asylum law, not just to grant her benefits, but to expand it for hundreds, if not thousands, of people who had the courage to testify in court to make sure justice was done. That is the sort of big picture leadership that I will bring on this issue, and make sure that people who have the courage to do that are rewarded. That is the sort of person we want to welcome here in the United States.
Thank you. Suzy?
Thank you. Same amount of time?
Yeah, 90 seconds.
So I always say that my mom, she came to this country when she was 19, and she raised my sister and I on her own. And I like to say she became a naturalized citizen in 1970. So I say that my mom is the best American I know, and she wasn't born here, right? We have a crisis on our hands with regard to our ability to keep each other safe, in particular in our undocumented communities and in our immigrant community writ large. And there are a few things that the district attorney can do, but this is a place where San Francisco has to come together. You've heard us here in a spirited debate on different things, but when it comes to Sanctuary City, we need to elect a district attorney who can unite folks, that we can stand together. Most recently, with the most recent raids, I stood with the mayor, Supervisor Ronan, a number of advocates. This is a place where San Francisco together has to say, one, we want to make sure that everybody understands that law enforcement doesn't care about your status. We want you to continue to report crimes. We want to be able to continue to help you. Two, we need to make sure that we're not punishing people who will deal with federal immigration consequences as a result of their plea, because it's a double punishment. So I've been working with advocates to make sure that we train prosecutors to not do that because it's not fair. And the last thing that we need to make sure that we do is connect folks to a seamless web of services. It's not unlike what we're doing with our young people. In San Francisco, we have a $12.3 billion budget, and we're dealing with someone in Washington who has made it his business to make this city live in terror. And as the chief elected law enforcement officer, which is what the district attorney is,
Thank you.
we need to have a fighter for that community.
Thank you. Chesa?
Look, we can be absolutely certain that the Trump administration is going to continue to push its nativist, racist rhetoric on this country and use that to divide us. We need a district attorney in San Francisco who doesn't just say the right things now that we're in this moment, but who has a track record of doing it. I want to tell you about the very first person who had an ICE hold in San Francisco County Jail, who wasn't handed over to ICE for deportation. I represented her. She was a grandmother from El Salvador. She was charged with shoplifting Christmas presents for her grandkids. I persuaded the sheriff in partnership with lots of community activists and organizers and her family that it didn't benefit San Francisco, that it harmed our relationship with our immigrant communities to hand her over to ICE, that she should be allowed to take responsibility for her shoplifting and go back to her family, right? That was before we had a Sanctuary City policy. I'm proud that David Campos, the author of our Sanctuary City policy, has endorsed me, as has the Latino Democratic Club, as has Sarah Souza, a member of the DCCC, who is a DACA recipient, right? David Campos fought over Kamala Harris's opposition, over Gavin Newsom's opposition to make Sanctuary City policy law. And we can't even get a straight answer from the other candidates on this stage as to whether they're willing to condemn that history of handing kids over to ICE, right? I will prosecute ICE agents when they put our children in danger. Not just condemn it, prosecute.
Thank you. Nancy?
So, I had been a prosecutor for a long time. I've said that several times. And I think that one of the misconceptions that everybody needs to walk away from is that prosecutors don't care about immigration status, that prosecutors want to lock up everyone, and prosecutors are only interested in incarceration because...
Please. All right. No interruptions.
Because it's not true. Because the prosecutors that work in the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, day in and day out, are compassionate, thoughtful people who really are concerned about public safety, but also the integrity of our community. So, immigration safe police have been around for a really long time. This is not something new. This is something that as a San Francisco prosecutor, I was trained to consider, that I was given the discretion to use to say, this is fair and this is not fair. And let's just concentrate on doing what is fair and just in our criminal justice system. And so the idea that, that somebody owns the idea of immigration safe pleas or working to make our community safer or compassion is a fallacy. The San Francisco District Attorney's Office has been a bastion of compassion. It has been a place where people can get justice and that we can be fair about how we treat our immigrant populations, documented or undocumented.
Thank you. Next question is on work culture, and Suzy will start this answer. Since January of 2019, some people have reported that over 20 assistant DAs have left the office for other jobs, including political positions. Others report that in their experience, the attorney assigned to prosecute a crime of which they were a victim was constantly changed. What will you do to improve morale in the office? How will you return focus on the law rather than politics?
So the premise underlying this question is the following, that the controller did a study of the district attorney's office, and there's been a 50% attrition rate over the past couple of years, and it's been most pronounced over the last couple of years. I think it's like upwards of 39 lawyers, and there's about 120 lawyers. So it's a sign that something's wrong. And I think a couple of things exist. One is, we're in a time of massive change, right? Change is hard, and what does it mean to be a prosecutor while you're actually doing the job? I think that you need someone who understands what it's like to try a case. You need someone who also has been out in the community and knows what people in the community have told me they view prosecutors as. You need someone who has the experience working in other agencies and can bring a full picture to what it means to run a prosecutor's office that is really dedicated to safety and justice and serving our community. That requires someone who's done that job, and that's me. But beyond that, we've also got to recognize that what is the job of the prosecutor? We've got to go to court. We've got to make sure that they have the support that they need to change fundamentally the way that they're doing the work that they're doing. And when you have the kind of flight that we have seen, that's not happening now. But more importantly, I was on the hiring committee when I worked at the district attorney's office, and we did a lot of work to make that office look like San Francisco. And the people who are leaving, 75% of that group are women, people of color, or LGBTQ members of our community. So what I will need all of your help to do is we have to attract talent and build a world-class law office that reflects our city.
Thank you. Chesa?
Look, all of us call ourselves progressives, and all of us say that we are committed to reform. But let's look across the country. This national movement for reforming the criminal justice system isn't being led by career prosecutors. It's being led by people like me, outsiders, who have a long track record of fighting to make the system fairer for everyone, right? People who've been on the front lines of money bail, immigration reform. And it's people like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia who started this movement. I am proud to have him as a friend and as an endorsement in this race. To the question about morale in the district attorney's office, I think part of the problem is that the district attorneys are being evaluated by metrics that have so little to do with public safety. Let's start rewarding people for reducing crime, not just punishing it. Let's start rewarding people for giving victims a voice, not just adding years of prison time. Let's start rewarding people for actually prioritizing serious cases like sexual assault instead of victimless cases and misdemeanors. That's the kind of change that our rank and file district attorneys want to see, that's going to restore morale, that's going to attract world-class talent to come live in a world-class city. And that's the kind of talent I'm going to recruit on day one, and we're going to reduce the caseloads, and we're going to increase the success at keeping our community safe. This isn't just a question of who can lead, it's a question of where we'll lead.
Thank you. Nancy?
So let me say again, I've been a prosecutor for a long time. I've been a prosecutor in the district attorney's office here for almost 11 years. And the thing that is incorrect about what Chesa just said is that there are metrics about years in prison, how many cases you prosecute, and that has not been my experience in the DA's office, and has not been a reason why people are leaving. People are leaving because they don't feel valued. Women do not feel valued in that office. People of color do not feel valued in that office, and they have no path forward. They do not know how they're going to make their careers in the DA's office. They do not feel invested in the communities, and the people who have stayed there are the ones that we really need to hold on to. So as the next district attorney, the things that I'm going to do a top to bottom look at pay disparities based on gender, race, and sexual orientation, and make sure that everybody's getting paid what they are due. I'm going to thank every single attorney that's still working there because they deserve gratitude for supporting this community and keeping it safe. I'm going to make sure that the workflow in the office is one that makes sense, not divert people into specialty units, because we really need to take care of the bread and butter work in the DA's office by making sure that the most serious crimes, the most serious units are fully staffed. Right now there are 3 attorneys handling all of the gang cases, 3 in this city. And we really should be doing more to support our attorneys in the district attorney's office.
Leif, let's take the time, all of you.
You got it. I believe we need a strong DA's office that recruits and retains the best lawyers. I'm the only candidate in the race who is a prosecutor and who manages a team of prosecutors on a day-to-day basis. That is the job of being DA. And we have a crushing morale problem. A quarter of the office has left in the last year. And when I talk to friends who work there, they say 2 things. These crushing caseloads. I have friends who are handling 120 cases at any given time. We cannot do the sort of individualized assessment and the individualized justice that we need in San Francisco with 120 cases at any given time. I'm going to get supervisors back into the courtrooms. I myself am going to lead by example and handle my own cases. I can't say I'm going to take 120 cases, but I'm going to get there in the courtroom. Frankly, it's something that I saw Jeff Adachi and Matt Gonzalez, the leadership of the Public Defender's Office, do very well. We've got to lead from the front, and that's something that I think will really buck up the troops and improve morale, as well as spread out the caseloads. I've been on the hiring committee at the Attorney General's office for 4 out of the 6.5 years that I was there. Every prosecutor we hired came through me with a veto power. I've done significant outreach to law schools. I've been in this room right here numerous times, tabling, recruiting the best and the brightest coming out of law schools in the Bay Area to come and work at the California Attorney General's office. We started an honors program that recruited really top-flight attorneys from around the country. We've done it successfully at the AG's office. I want to bring that same model to the DA's office here in San Francisco.
Great, thank you. And bonus points for not making me stop you. The next question is on recidivism, and I believe Chesa will start this round. What can and will you do to address high recidivism rates, and in particular when it comes to substance abuse and individuals with mental health issues? What will you do when it comes to those individuals who commit serious or violent offenses?
So I want to talk about 2 things. First of all, I want to talk about diversion and collaborative courts, and I want to second talk about restorative justice. You know, I think it's really sad to hear that in San Francisco, there are people running for this office who, as I just heard and was surprised to hear, don't value the work being done in our collaborative courts and our diversion programs. I think some of the most important work at reducing recidivism, at making sure that people who are vulnerable to being victimized by crime and vulnerable to committing crimes are folks who need those diversion programs. There's amazing work being done in young adult court, in drug court. I'm the only candidate on this stage who has referred a client to all of those programs and more. Community Justice Court, LEAD. I've worked in them, I've referred people there, and I know that they save lives and prevent crime. We need a district attorney who's going to commit to those, who's going to double down on them, who's going to expand access to them, who's going to make them more successful, because that is how we prevent crime. Now, we need to punish crime, and we need to hold people accountable when they commit crime, but we need to do it in a way that is victim-centered. And that's why I'm committed to giving every victim of every crime in San Francisco a voice, an opportunity to participate in the process, so that we're focusing on healing the harm that crime causes, not simply punishing the symptoms.
Thank you. Nancy?
So I think that what you can see when you step outside of this auditorium today and back out onto McAllister Street is that we have a mental health crisis. We also have a homelessness crisis. We have a crisis of drug addiction. And these are all issues that kind of wrap themselves around into the criminal justice system, for better or worse. I think that really when we look at them, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to intervene. It's an opportunity to get people into services. It's an opportunity for help. And when I'm district attorney, we will continue to do that kind of good work to make sure that people who are committing crimes based on mental health issues or drug addiction are funneled into appropriate behavioral health courts or drug courts or other specialty courts that are collaborative between the courts, the Public Defender's Office, the private bar, and the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. Because again, San Francisco is one of the most progressive district attorney's offices in the state, in the country, and will continue to be so under my leadership. I think that we also need to make sure that we have some accountability in the system, that when people continue to reoffend and reoffend and reoffend, that we look at what we're doing and try to figure out what we're doing wrong, how to help that person, and if that person is not in a place to be helped yet, then we need to have some consequences. But then also having a place where we're open-minded to continuing to have an offer of rehabilitative services down the line.
Thank you. Leif?
Let's see if I can get this in under time. Our 70% recidivism rate is probably the most obvious example of how our criminal justice system is broken. Nearly 70% of people, when they're released, are right back behind bars within 3 years. That is outrageous. We have a model that works. I've mentioned it before. It's our juvenile justice system. Let's drill down on those root causes of what is driving this person's problem in the first place, solve that, and turn that person's life around. As I've said, I want to start with 18 to 24-year-olds, transitional age youth, and then expand that to 25 to 35, 35 to 45. But there's also some great models throughout California, throughout the country, that we should follow those best practices. San Diego has a life plan project for people as they're going into jail or prison, where the prosecutor works with the defense attorney, works with probation and the trial court to say, what is your problem and how can we fix it while you are incarcerated? How can we establish a re-entry linkage so that when you come out, you have a place to live, you have a job, you're registered to vote, you can have a voice in society, and do all of that meaningful engagement and re-engagement with society to bring those 70% recidivism rates down. That's the sort of work that I want to do, and we have to reward prosecutors for doing it. To tie it to the last question, if all we do is judge people by conviction rates, that's what they're going to work for. Why not judge prosecutors by the recidivism rates of the defendants that they're prosecuting? Get them invested and bought into that process, and you will change the incentive structure and get much better results.
Thank you. Suzy?
So you might already know this, but the largest provider of mental health services in San Francisco is Jail Psych. Folks know that, right? So we've created this incentive. You want to get mental health treatment, pick up a felony. And it makes absolutely no sense at all. So as the chief elected law enforcement officer, we have new laws on our books that will help us divert people from the criminal justice system and get them the help that they need if we're able to show that the underlying cause of what the crime was had to do with something in the DSM-5 that was a product of mental illness. And so you have my commitment to build out that process, but then we also have to take our responsibility as San Franciscans to demonstrate to the rest of California that this is a way to make us more safe. That when we're using our jails as de facto state mental hospitals, we are not succeeding. It's expensive and it doesn't work very well. So you need to elect a chief prosecutor who is committed to diverting people out. The other thing we need to do is, I completely agree with Chesa on this. Collaborative courts are fantastic. We have an adversarial system, so we start there. Sometimes we fight to get justice, sometimes we work together. And when people are committing crimes because they're sick, or they are substance abuse, they're abusing substances, or they're mentally ill, it's a really special place in 850 Bryant where all the parties work together to get the person the help they need, and it's been incredibly successful, and I agree with the TAY program. But we have to take it a step further. That's after we've filed a case. On a lot of the things that are affecting neighborhoods, we can involve neighborhood courts, which is a panel of community members before we even file a case, where we can get some accountability for what's happening outside of our criminal justice system. Thank you.
Great. So we will now move to the closing statement of this evening. Before we give the candidates the opportunity to give us their closing statements, we just want to remind folks that this election is a ranked choice voting election system in California. You will be able to get more information about how to do this, what the process looks like. Outside, there's flyers from Fair Vote that will inform you about all the processes. We will now go to the closing statements. Since we started with Suzy, we will start with Leif for the closing statements. Each candidate will get 2 minutes. I would really hate to interrupt you on your closing statement, so please stick to that. 2 minutes. Leif, your time will start now.
Well, thank you, Yoel, and thank you all so much for your interest in this race. We're at a crossroads in our city right now. We can settle for the status quo and more of the same, or we can take a fundamentally new course and be a city that's compassionate and progressive, but that's safe and clean as well. You know, it's been mentioned at some of the other debates, and I'm actually surprised it hasn't come up yet. This is the first open seat race in 110 years for district attorney in San Francisco. 1909 was the last time an incumbent DA voluntarily stepped aside. So I started doing a little bit of research, because I wasn't around in 1909, about what San Francisco was like back then. And I came across this great little anecdote about President William Howard Taft coming to San Francisco right around there, it was 1911, but bear with me, to officially award San Francisco the World's Fair. And he toured San Francisco, and he met with business leaders and civic leaders, and he was so taken by this city that over dinner at the Cliff House restaurant, he raised a glass to toast San Francisco as the city that knows how. The city that knows how. How many people have heard that quote before? Or Kane used it. It's kind of an unofficial model for San Francisco. And there is so much that we can be proud of when it comes to civil rights and human rights and infrastructure and technology. But when it comes to criminal justice, when I go around talking to folks as a candidate, or when I went around as a commissioner or as a prosecutor, nobody thinks that when it comes to criminal justice, we are the city that knows how. There was a little mention of this homelessness and mental health crisis. Frankly, I wish it had gotten more attention. It's the #1 issue when I talk to folks at farmers markets, at bus stops, and our house parties. There is an explosion of car break-ins, something that wasn't talked about tonight, but it is a real issue for people across the city and at every rung of the socioeconomic spectrum. Those are the issues that we need real leadership and a fundamentally new direction on. And what my campaign is all about is reclaiming that mantle for San Francisco as the city that knows how. I'm honored to be supported by the firefighters, deputy sheriffs, Fiona Ma, and others, and I would love to earn your support as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy.
Oh. You threw me off there. I thought you were going to go see. All you have to do is look around on the streets of San Francisco to know that what's happening now is not working. As a career prosecutor who worked in the district attorney's office for more than a decade, I have seen what works and what we need to fix. I know how broken the office has become. It has become weakened and politicized and is failing to prioritize crimes like drug dealing, car break-ins, and burglaries on the mistaken idea that these are not serious crimes. As a result, San Francisco is ranked #1 in property crimes in the entire nation. I'm running as district attorney to put community, public safety, and our values at the heart of everything that we do. We must protect our victims, and particularly the most vulnerable, like the elderly, our communities of immigrants, and also children and people who are victims of domestic violence. We must prosecute crimes that harm public safety and be there for every neighborhood. At the same time, we must treat every crime as an opportunity, not just for accountability, but as a point of intervention. This city has nurtured generations of immigrants, like my family, and I'm very proud that my father is here tonight to support me in my bid for district attorney. He always dreamed of becoming a lawyer, and he passed that on to me. And I am here every single day for the people of San Francisco. I am here because I believe in public safety, I believe in community, I believe that we can do this together. And I'm running for district attorney because I'm not a politician. I think that we can be safe and just, and we can make sure that we lift everyone up based on our shared values, our progressive values, and I hope to earn your vote as the next district attorney.
Thank you. Chesa.
This is a unique moment in American and San Francisco history. It's the first time in any of our lifetimes when there's a broad national consensus that the criminal justice system is broken. It needs drastic reform. And look, as Leif said, it's the first time in over a century here in San Francisco where there's no incumbent district attorney. This is a historic opportunity. I'm running for district attorney because we need to seize this moment. I'm the only candidate who's not a career prosecutor. I've never used money bail. I've never cooperated with ICE. I never will. And I work every day in the Hall of Justice. I'm the only one here who works in the Hall of Justice today. And I do it not to contribute to mass incarceration, to send more people to prison for longer, but to find better outcomes for all of us through our collaborative courts. For example, I am so proud to have been endorsed by a diversity of leaders from San Francisco and across the country. civil rights icon Angela Davis, Jamal Chulon, who spent 7 years in prison after being framed for murder by San Francisco police, as well as folks who are leading this national movement. Sean King, Larry Krasner, Rachel Rollins, all across the country, people who understand that we can be safer when we're more progressive, that it takes outsiders with vision and imagination to fix this broken system. I'm also so honored to have the support of 4 members of the Board of Supervisors here in San Francisco, Fewer, Marr, Peskin, and Ronan, as well as San Francisco City College teachers who know that we need to break the school-to-prison pipeline if we want to keep our communities safe. Look, as your district attorney, I'm going to transform this system by making every arrest an opportunity for intervention and moving lives away from crime. And I want to make sure that this is clear, I'm on record, I will end money bail. I will never cooperate with ICE. I will build an office with diversity and language access for every single person in San Francisco. Our system is broken. Please join me in fixing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzy?
So, I'm running to be your district attorney because I believe in San Francisco. I believe that our city can be both safe and just. That's what I've devoted my career to. It's where I'm raising my family. As I said when we started, it's where I took Mimi to my public school. I'm going to say a guess. For all of you who are in this room tonight, you came here because you share that love of San Francisco and you believe we can do things better. But too often, we are presented with a choice. Are you on team safety? Because on team safety, I care about car break-ins, I want domestic abusers held accountable. But if I have to give up a little justice, that's just the cost of doing business on team safety. Like, okay, are you on team justice? Team justice, I want to eradicate racial disparities. I want to reverse wrongful convictions. But if that just means my car gets broken into, if I've got to sacrifice a little safety over here on team justice, I guess that's just what we do. We are too often given this false choice that we have to choose between safety and justice. This is San Francisco. This is the city of St. Francis. The system isn't working well enough for anyone, but too often safety is predicated on zip code, and justice is only given to a few. It's not working well enough for anyone. That's why we need a collaborator. I'm honored to have such diverse support. I have everyone from John Avalos to Dianne Feinstein. I don't just have the firefighters, I have the janitors, I have the Teamsters. I have 7 members of the Board of Supervisors. I have my 3 kids, Maureen, Vivian, and Grace. They do like getting plugged. I am building a coalition, and I ask you to join us. This campaign isn't just about electing a district attorney, because no one person does it alone. It's about San Francisco coming together in our city, for our city, to demonstrate what it looks like when our progressive values are in action, because we're making each other more safe, and we are making sure that our justice system is just for all, not just for some. I would be honored to have your support on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Before we close this evening, we have a few announcements.